the fact that Russia is unable to do anything to help Iran uh, tells me that not only is Russia not a reliable ally, but it means that Russia also is stretched in their war against Ukraine, that they don't have the capability to do anything to really help Iran as it's under attack from the United States and Israel. So this is another indicator for me that Russia is not unbeatable, that their victory is not inevitable. In fact, I would say the opposite. A second thing, though, is it looks like, not surprisingly, oil prices are going up because of what's happening in the region in the Middle East. And so that helps Russia. The higher the price of oil, when they're selling it illegally to China or India or whoever else, that increases the resources they get. So that's an indirect effect on the war. The third thing is when it comes to precision weapons like long-range precision strike or Patriot interceptors, the U.S. is using a lot of these things, as is Israel right now. And so it will be difficult, I imagine, to have any excess that the U.S. could sell to European allies who would then pass that to Ukraine. So there may be some challenges on that front.
Hi everyone, welcome to 24 War and Politics YouTube channel. Today my guest is General Ben Hodges. I am going to discuss with him some topics which, in my opinion, the most critical and influential for us, for Ukrainians. How does war in Iran influence war in Ukraine? Has World War III begun, and where can happen new hotbed of conflict on the planet? Dear Ben, welcome to our program.
Maxim, thank you very much for the privilege.
When it comes to the war in Iran, what consequences for us should we wait? Because we know that Iran is Russia's ally and has supplied Shaheds and missiles to Russia.
So 2 or 3 things come to mind. First, the fact that Russia is unable to do anything to help Iran tells me that not only is Russia not a reliable ally, but it means that Russia also is stretched in their war against Ukraine, that they don't have the capability to do anything to really help Iran as it's under attack from the United States and Israel. So this is another indicator for me that Russia is not unbeatable, that their victory is not inevitable. In fact, I would say the opposite. A second thing, though, is it looks like, not surprisingly, oil prices are going up because of what's happening in the region in the Middle East. And so that helps Russia. The higher the price of oil, when they're selling it illegally to China or India or whoever else, that increases the resources they get. So that's an indirect effect on the war. The third thing is when it comes to precision weapons like long-range precision strike or Patriot interceptors, the U.S. is using a lot of these things, as is Israel right now. And so it will be difficult, I imagine, to have any excess that the U.S. could sell to European allies who would then pass that to Ukraine. So there may be some challenges on that front.
Military analysts reported that Russia's S-400 Triumf surface-to-air missile failed in Iran. I would like to ask you why Russian air defense in Iran didn't cope with Israel and U.S. missiles.
Well, of course, we don't know enough. I don't know enough to make a useful analysis here. Having a weapon, the technology is one thing, but being trained on how to use it and also having a system, a network system that includes sensors and shooters and people making the right command and control decisions. I would imagine that air and missile defense of Iran was a very high priority target for the U.S. and Israel. Would be the normal procedure to take out the enemy's air defense from the very beginning so that you can then go after the other targets that you want to hit. So presumably the U.S. and the Israelis would have used a combination of cyber as well as other electronic warfare, jamming of radar, and then kinetic strike to reduce the effectiveness of any of Iran's air defense systems.
Syria, Venezuela, Iran, Russia has been losing its allies. What does it indicate in terms of geopolitics, and how could events develop in Iran?
Well, we don't know for sure what's going to happen next in Iran because it's not really clear what the president's strategic objectives are. I think, we've heard several different justifications over the last few days about what he wanted to accomplish, but it's never been a consistent one thing. And so if you don't know if we're not really sure about the end state, then you don't know how this will develop. Part of this, of course, will depend on how what's left of the regime reacts. And I think that there is still a lot of capability in the leadership, even though the Ayatollah and many of his advisors were killed. This is a very large organization. The IRGC is a very large organization, and they've been in power for a long time. And I think that right now they're fighting for their survival, which is why I think they're very dangerous. And I suspect they have still a lot of capability, but it's hard to know. I imagine that's what the Pentagon and the Israeli Defense Force are looking at now, is battle damage assessment to determine who's still standing and what's still there.
Yeah, and actually, if I understood you correctly, you don't understand final destination of this operation and this war, yeah?
Right.
Okay,
yeah, because I've heard so many different things. I mean, one has been to make sure that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. Number two was to protect the protesters who were being massacred by the Iranian security forces. Number three, make sure that Iran could never be a supporter or supplier of terrorism across the region. And then regime change. All of these, are possibilities, but they're not all necessarily in sync. And if you're talking about regime change, who comes next? And I don't think that the administration has a clear plan for who comes next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in terms of the situation in Iran, we see that axis of evil is falling apart, but actually China remains the main character. I would like to hear from you your expectation from the upcoming Donald Trump and Xi Jinping meeting.
Well, I imagine that the Chinese, of course, are watching very closely what's happening in Iran, partly because it affects their supply of oil, but also, maybe more importantly, they'd be studying U.S. capabilities, looking at how we conduct operations with carrier-based and land-based platforms. I imagine also they're paying close attention to how much ammunition we're consuming. That would be something of interest to them, to judge how much we still have and how fast can we replace what's being used. On the other hand, the president, depending on how this turns out, could show up in China saying, "Hey, look, here's what I did in Venezuela. Here's what I did in Iran. We have real capabilities. Let's make a deal somehow." So it's too early to know exactly who's going to have the stronger position going in.
Ben, do you have any predictions or any forecasts? What will be with oil prices in terms of this situation in Iran?
Well, it looks like this morning already they've gone up, and of course that means that even as Russia tries to sell its oil to China, India, and other countries, if the price per barrel is going up, obviously that means more revenue coming into Russia. So that's a possible positive outcome for Russia, depending on how much and how long that lasts.
Gotcha. Ben, some experts say that World War III has begun. Do you agree with them?
I don't know that those kinds of labels or categories are helpful in understanding what we're doing. I do believe that Russia is at war with Europe, but they're doing it in the gray zone with the things that are just below the level of Article 5, kinetic strike, and they do it in such a way that makes it difficult to attribute who's actually doing it. And of course, they do that to create confusion and fear in European countries so that the populations put pressure on their government to stop supporting Ukraine. So that's going on. I don't know if it helps us understand and think more clearly if we say, okay, this is the beginning of World War III. I think that's probably a designation that will be applied at the end of whatever this is. I don't know that the Allies in the Second World War referred to it as, hey, we're in World War II. I think that was a name that came afterwards. And I do believe, though, and maybe this is closer to your point, I do believe that what's happening in Ukraine, Iran, with North Korea and China, that these are all connected. Not that they're allies, but that if you can defeat Russia first, then it leads to even more complete isolation of Iran and of North Korea, and it will make a strong signal it will send a strong signal to the Chinese that the West is committed to protecting sovereignty of borders and international law, and that the West has the political will to stand up and defeat Russia and Iran. That would be a powerful signal of deterrence to China. So you could say, well, okay, well, this sounds like a strategy for winning a world war. Perhaps so.
Mhm. According to the current geopolitical situation, do you understand where can happen new hotbed of conflict on the planet?
Well, of course, a lot depends on what China decides to do, where they use economic power and diplomatic power versus coercion or military threats or actual military force. That is something that we should all be paying attention to. But I also think about the Trump administration. They definitely want to get Cuba somehow, either by causing the regime to collapse or some way to bring about regime change in Cuba. But Africa is a place where the West just does not have any real significant influence, at least not with military capabilities. And you've got the Chinese and Russian mercenary organizations and all sorts of other security challenges across much of Europe, and which is also where a lot of resources are located.
Mhm. South America and Africa, if I understood you correctly, yeah.
Yeah,
Potential.
that's a better way to say it than I did.
Okay. I would like to ask you about potential participation of China in the peace talks. Xi Jinping stated during the meeting with German Chancellor that there has to be provided equal participation of all parties in peace talks. After this statement, some experts said that China can join to trilateral peace talks between US, Russia, and Ukraine. How do you assess possibility of Chinese participation, and under what circumstances it could happen?
Well, that's interesting. I would want to know the price. I mean, for if China is going to do something that helps bring about a just, sustainable, peaceful outcome, what do they get in return for it? I don't think they're doing this out of goodwill. They would expect access to continued access, for example, to Russian oil and gas, and also I'm not sure we want to see a large Chinese footprint in Ukraine or in the region that would give them more influence there. But I don't know. I think ultimately Ukraine should decide who it is that they're going to deal with.
Yeah, but actually, what does Chinese participation indicate for Washington, Kiev, and Moscow?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it would reflect a failure of President Trump's claim that he could solve it in 24 hours. I've never believed that, and I think the administration's approach has been doomed from the beginning. But if China now has to come in and help, bring something about, unless that was the grand design all along, which I doubt, that would not be a positive reflection. It would show a weakening of American influence.
I gotcha. Head of Zelensky office Kirilo Budanov stated that security guarantees, which were proposed by United States, have been already accepted by Russia. We actually don't know exactly how these security guarantees will look like, but we have read some leaks in press. Something similar to the fifth article of NATO Charter. Why would Russia have agreed if it is true?
Well, of course, I would trust General Budanov and his assessment of things. But I have zero trust in the Russians. Unless they are forced to do something, they will never live up to any agreement they've ever made. And I think Ukrainians know that better than anybody. So I also am skeptical that the Trump administration would actually react as if this was an Article 5. I mean, they're not even willing to provide Ukraine the capabilities it needs right now. So to all of a sudden be willing to have pilots fly in and out of Ukraine to launch a strike against Russians, that would really be something. And I think Ukraine, the government, your government knows this, and that they will be very wary of any sort of agreement or promises that do not have a real strong binding, something like a treaty with the Senate had to ratify it. I mean, that would be much stronger than, say, the famous Budapest memorandum.
Russia will walk out of talks if Ukraine doesn't agree to hand over all of the Donetsk region this week, Bloomberg reported. What Russian behavior do you predict in terms of peace talks further in future?
I think that Russia is never, ever going to change to never back away from their maximalist demands. They've been consistent about that. I'm sorry. They've been consistent about that, and they have no interest in getting to any kind of a peaceful, sustainable outcome whereas Ukraine retains its territory. And if they're threatening to walk out, I mean, I don't think anybody would be surprised. But what will the Trump reaction be to that? Will he blame the Ukrainians or will he blame the Russians? My guess is that he would blame the Ukrainians. He has done that in the past. But of course, this is not happening in a vacuum. He'll also be thinking about, what the operations against Iran. So all of these things are happening at the same time. Plus, they haven't sorted out, who's in charge of Venezuela and getting oil there. So this is a problem when you get rid of some of the architecture that has grown up over the years of a national security staff, of having skilled ambassadors, a full, strong State Department that has quality negotiators, the intelligence services, the information services, all of these things that the Trump administration got rid of in the first year. They really need them right now.
When it comes to the current geopolitical situation and domestic situation in Russia, I mean military, economic, political, domestic situation in Russia, do you predict or do you believe in any black swan events when it comes to Putin's fate and potential end of war in Ukraine? Something like maybe Prigozhin's march or palace coup?
Yeah, I would not rule out any of that. I'm not seeing or hearing any indicators of something like that that's out there. But of course, um, that's why they call them black swans, because they're, they're so rare. Not something you expected to see. Um, I think for all of us, having a clear understanding of our objective. What is the purpose? What are we trying to achieve? And then doing that, using the resources in a smart way to accomplish that. Part of what has made Ukraine successful over the past years is your society seems to be so resilient. I mean, able to withstand so much, and people are committed to helping protect Ukrainian sovereignty because they know what the alternative is. That's an important part, especially when you do have black swans show up.
My last question is linked to European policy. Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó said that official Budapest will block the allocation of any EU loan of 90 billion euros to Ukraine until the transit of oil to Hungary via the Druzhba oil pipeline is resumed. How could events develop in terms of this confrontation?
Well, one of the best things that I think is going to happen here in a few weeks is elections in Hungary, and we won't have to listen to the Hungarian foreign minister parroting Kremlin talking points anymore. I think right now the opposition seems to have a significant lead in polling ahead of the actual election, and I think that will be an opportunity for improved relations between Hungary and Ukraine, um, and with a new Hungarian government no longer blocking things that are helpful to Ukraine.
Ben, thank you very much for this interview. Thank you very much for your time, and have a good day.
Maxim, thank you. I always enjoy speaking with you. Thanks for the privilege.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.